Hello everyone, I'm back and let me show you what I've done. Alright, so here is the front end. It is painted as much as I can on this side. The next thing to do is flip it over and work on the top side. But the bottom side is pretty much done. I say pretty much because more work can be done, and I'm going to show you what you could do if you wanted to do it. And it has to do with what we call color sanding. So let me go ahead and get a paint can over here, only because it's a primer can, only because it's colorful. All right, so if you look at this back section, this is the way it is straight from the paint can. When I did the Rattlecan spray, let me find that paint because this paint happens to have a really good spray pattern, which is key to how good you can get the thing to look. So this stuff is called Color Shot. It happened to be the right color. It is a Rattlecan. You just shake it up. One of the things with this, it says on the instructions, make sure you shake it up well, a full minute before you start and as you go, because of the color pigment that's in there. It needs to be suspended well to spray well. And it does, it sprays really well. It still has a circular pattern, which makes it a little bit difficult to spray. I wish it had a fan pattern that's easier to spray, but it doesn't, so anyway. But I came out with what I think is a really good paint job for a Rattlecan. So how do you judge a good paint job? Well, it's on how glossy or mirror-like it is. So in this case, if you look, I take this can, and the way I judge is I get something with text on it, all right? And then I put the piece up there. Let me see if I can get it right. All right, so if you look, there you go. All right, so there is my can, and then there is the reflection of the can in the paint. And see how you can actually read what that says? That means that that's got a pretty good mirror finish. I mean, not perfect. If you've seen I've talked about the $12,000 and $20,000 paint job on those, you walk up and it literally looks like a mirror. It's hard to tell that it's a body panel. Also, you can look at things in the distance. The problem is you have to get it in the right light, and it's hard to tell on this one. Okay, so you could leave this like it is. Two problems. One is the fact that Rattlecan paint is not UV resistant. So what'll happen is this paint, if you did nothing to it and just took it out there, let's say you got it, you were happy with the orange peel that's on there. Did I talk about that? Orange peel is when you spray it and it's not perfectly smooth, it's got a texture to it, like the surface of an orange. And it's going to vary depending on how well you spray it. Now, if you go look at any factory car, they have orange peel. People think factory cars have these phenomenal paint jobs. They don't. They've got orange peel all over them. And so these professional jobs that they charge, like I said, $12,500 to $20,000, they don't have any orange peel. Okay, but if you're happy with a paint job that's comparable to a factory paint job, you can just leave the Rattlecan. The problem is it's not UV resistant. So a Rattlecan paint job, from experience I know, it lasts anywhere from a year to 2 years if you do nothing to it. Now, and it's because of the UV rays, it starts fading quickly, relatively quickly. So if you were to put a piece of tape on this, let's say you were happy with it, you took it out, and for some reason you put a piece of tape on a piece of it. As time went on, there would be a color difference between what was under the tape, color difference and a gloss difference between what was under the tape and what's not under the tape. Right? To get around that, you can wax it. And wax will give some UV protection. Again, it's going to fade a little anyway, but it'll be way better than if you don't wax it. But you have to make sure you keep up and maintain the waxing. You can't just wax it once and then expect that to work. All right, so the other way is to put a clear coat on it. Now, if you use the typical Rattlecan clear coat, it's called 1K because it's one part, you'll have the same problem. The clear coat will degrade over time. So again, if you wax it, that'll help offset that somewhat. What you can do better is to put a 2K or two-part Rattlecan on. They're somewhat pricey. I think they're like $20 a can or something like that. But what happens is it has a catalyst that's built in the can. You take the top off and you smash it against the bottom, and it opens up the catalyst inside, releases it, and it mixes. So then you have a two-part clear. You spray that on there, and then your Rattlecan paint job will last quite a while. Again, probably not as long as a real 2K base coat, clear coat paint job, but significantly longer than if you don't treat it at all. All right, so anyway, so this one has a little bit of orange peel on it. Again, not bad for a Rattlecan paint job. And that's because I've been spraying Rattlecan for a long time, decades. So I've gotten used to it. So you could go out with this. But another option is to do what we call color sanding. Now what color sanding is, it's taking a very fine sandpaper and evening out the surface, flattening out this orange peel that's on here. Now, sandpaper, for those of you who don't know, comes in different grits. The coarsest I've seen is 30 grit, might come coarser, I don't know. All the way up to, I just heard about a guy using 8,000 grit sandpaper. I've never even seen 8,000. I didn't know existed until they were talking about this. But I suspect if you took 8,000 grit sandpaper, looked at it, it looked like a sheet of paper. You couldn't even tell there was sandpaper on it. Okay, so, but the thing is, 8,000 grit would take forever to get anything to sand. So what you want to do if you want to color sand is you get the finest grit that you can tolerate the amount of time it takes to sand the surface smooth. All right, so typically what you'll do is you'll start off with a little bit of an aggressive sandpaper, and what it does is it leaves sanding scratches in it. So then the next level of sandpaper up, so let's say you start with 400 grit sandpaper. It's going to leave sanding scratches. It's going to flatten it real quick, but it's going to leave sanding scratches. Then you would go to 600, and the point of the 600 is to get rid of the sanding scratches. It'll flatten it further, but it'll also get rid of the sanding scratches from the 400. Then you can go to 800, 1,000, up to whatever you want. At some point, you can stop and you can polish it using both rubbing compound and polishing compound, and those go up another level. All right. And then again, you can clear coat it from there. If I went through all that trouble, I would clear coat it with the 2K clear coat. All right, so I just wanted to explain the process of what's going on. What I did was I got 400 grit, I got 600 grit, and I got 1,000 grit. So I was afraid 400 grit would be a little too aggressive. So what I did was I came in here and I color sanded this front end. So now you can see that there's no more orange peel. If you look at this, it's flat. Now what it does do also though was it shows all of the low spots. So if you look, there's a couple of spots here. See how it's still glossy right there? And that's because that's a scratch in the surface. It's not perfectly smooth. The body work wasn't perfect along here. I didn't make this perfect because again, this is the bottom side of the car and somebody would have to be crawling underneath the car to see this. So those are things that I'm not going to fix. There's no reason to fix them. Again, if you pay $12,000 to $20,000, you won't see these things. They'll get rid of these things. The reason why is because all of this stuff takes time. I can make this absolutely perfect, but it's just going to take time, and there's no reason to take that kind of time unless the owner of the car wants to pay $12,000 to $20,000. If they did that, I wouldn't even be using Rattlecan, so that's not even an option. All right, so I sanded this with 600 grit. It got rid of the orange peel, except for the low spots that are there. All right, so now the difference is this is absolutely flat and smooth, but you notice it lost its gloss, because when you sand it, that's what you do, is you get rid of the gloss. You can come back in and you can polish this and use a rubbing compound and a polishing compound, and get some of the gloss back, and then when you put wax on, you'll actually get all of the gloss back. So I actually did this yesterday, but I wanted to get some work done. So this area in the front nose and this sunken in area needed to be repainted. I ran out of paint, so I had to paint that sunken in area and a couple of other spots. So I went ahead and redid this area in here because it was dry spray. So it had more orange peel than it should. So I went in and flattened it and resprayed it. Unfortunately, some of the overspray got on here. And so what it is I actually had this where I went ahead and used first the 600 grit, got it flat. Then I used the rubbing compound right here. And there's different brands. I just went to Walmart and this was there. All right, so I used that and got it flatter than the 600 grit because this is finer. And then after that, I went back in with polishing compound. And you can do these by hand or machine. I've got a polishing machine. I first did it by hand, and then I followed that back up with the polishing machine. All right, once you do that, those two, it's going to get pretty good, but not great. And then I went in and I used wax. This is the wrong wax, but it's what I had on hand. It's what I use for doing mold work, for mold release. All right, so then I went and waxed it. So this area right here was more glossy than the area over here that was sprayed, or this area right here that I resprayed. Now the problem is once you put wax on it, then paint won't stick. It's going to cause fish eyes, it's going to cause issues. So you really don't want to put wax on anything until you're done. And in fact, I don't think I have it anymore, but what I do is anything that I touch with wax, like a rag or whatever, I take a Sharpie and put a W on it. And that lets me know that do not use this rag anywhere. Don't let it touch anywhere that you're going to paint or do any kind of body work in the future. All right, just a little tip because I've got rags everywhere and for different stages, and the car's in different stages. So now if we come up here to this front nose that I repainted, and we do the same reflection test, you got to get the light right. It's early morning, but it makes it to where it's cooler for me. But there we go. Let's see. I have it to where I can see the reflection, but it's not coming out on the camera right. Yeah, it's not. All right, well, you'll have to take my word for it that I can read the label and the reflection. Yeah, I can't get it. Sorry. You can kind of see it, right? Now, like I said, you got to get it. Let me try it from the other side. Maybe that'll help. All right, yeah, there we go. That's better. It's still not there. You can't tell it how good the reflection is in the camera. But you can see my hand there. The reflection of my hand and the tree. You can also see the slight orange peel when you look right there, how it's not absolutely smooth. Anyway, so by going in and polishing it and doing all of that, you can get a almost perfect paint job for, like I said, cheap, way less than your $12,000 to $20,000, and most people would be absolutely happy with that. Here's another thing was I got this all flat and smooth, and somehow this got chipped. I have no idea how because I was trying to be careful, but you can see there's a chip there, and it went all the way down to the primer. So what I did was, as I was spraying the rest of this, I went ahead and each time went in and took the paint and just spotted it right there. The intent was to fill this little divot with paint and try to get this to an even surface. For one thing, the color will match now. So now I will go in and color sand this, get rid of the gloss here, and that'll get that down to, there'll still be the divot right there, and it'll still be glossy like in there because it's low, but it won't be nearly as noticeable. And again, this is the bottom side, so it's not critical. All right, so a couple things that I did is, one, I bought this adjustable radius longboard hand sanding file block. So what this is, it's a sanding block. So what you do is, on big flat areas, you want to make sure they're flat. So you take a board like this and attach sandpaper to it. I got both hook and loop, which is Velcro sandpaper, and I got PSA, which is has adhesive on the back of it. It's a peel and stick. You peel off the back, and then it's got adhesive that sticks on there. This one, when I read about it, said, oh, you can use either one with it. And in my mind, it's going, well, how do they do that? So one of the disadvantages of the hook and loop is that it's kind of spongy. And ideally, if you want to get something like the $20,000 paint job, what you use to block sand can't be spongy, because the sponge will allow it to follow the ripples. You don't want any ripples. You want it absolutely flat on the areas that are supposed to be absolutely flat. So you want something that's hard and not flexible. So PSA, the hook and loop works if you're not trying to get to that $20,000 paint job level. I thought this would not use the hook and loop when you use the PSA. It does the opposite of what I thought. You go ahead and use this last piece right here, has hook and loop on the back side, and then the top side is the PSA. So the disadvantage of this is that it's still, we'll call it a little bit spongy. So it's not going to get absolutely glass smooth doing that. It's going to get good, but it's just not going to get that like a mirror finish. It's going to get close. Anyway, the advantage of this one is that it's adjustable. See, it's got these slots in it, and then this turnbuckle. And if you turn the turnbuckle, you can either make this thing curve up or down depending on your surface. So if you have a curved surface, but you still want to make sure it's relatively flat with the curve, you can use this turnbuckle. And if you notice now, it's not flat anymore. It's got a curve to it. So if I put it against there, you can see that it's, what is that, ½ an inch higher in the middle. So if I was trying to match the curve of, let's say, this front end, then I would put this on here and I would adjust it. See, right now it's got that ½ inch gap. So I would adjust it down until it matches there we go, matches the curve right there. All right, so then I could sand this and make sure it was flat all the way across there. All right, so what that does is, without that, you can get it to where it looks flat, but there can be ripples, big ripples across the surface. So again, that's the difference between the less expensive and the more expensive. They get rid of all those ripples. So it would be absolutely flat. All right, so this thing was $32, I think. They have ones that are better, a lot better, but they start at like $157, I think, for one set, and then the other set was $250. And I asked people that use them, and they said, yep, they're worth the money if you're a professional shop and you use it every day and you're trying to get that high level $12,000 to $20,000 paint job. But they also said that for a hobbyist or someone that's not doing it for a professional, it's hard to justify spending that extra $157 to $250 for a set of sanding blocks. So that's up to you whether you want to do that. I will try to get some links on different things. Here's how I sanded. That piece hadn't come in yet. It came in late yesterday, and I wanted to get this color sanded. So what I did was, here is my 600 grit hook and loop sandpaper. It comes in a roll, and it's made specifically to fit on something like this. So this is a hook and loop sanding block. So I just put it on there. There's a obviously seam in the middle in between those two. I didn't care because I'm not trying to get to that level. This did allow me to sand this whole thing to 600 grit and keep it relatively flat. Not perfectly flat, not as flat as it would be if I used that, but relatively flat. One of the things is when you're sanding, make sure when you put down your sander, you put it down with the sandpaper face up so that you don't get junk on it, because that junk will mess up your paint job. And then this is the other piece that I use. This mimics the sander. This is the sander I use. I also have a round one. So it's a palm sander. They call it a mouse sander, detail sander. And this is 320 grit, which was what I was using before I switched to the 600 grit. And so that allows me to get into spots that are hard to get to. This allows me to get into spots that won't get to. And then I use most of the things. Sanding sponge, here's another one. Sanding sponges. So this is literally a sponge that has sandpaper on it. The ones that I found, they actually come in coarse, medium, and fine. So I don't know how those grits correspond to, 400, 600, 320, whatever. But I start with the coarse, go to medium, go to the fine. And it worked for getting into these little intricate corners where the detail sander wouldn't go and the yellow one wouldn't go. All right, and that was a bit tedious. The other thing I use, these came in. So I use these, they're basically Scotch-Brite on a thing, and I use it on a 1/4-inch shaft so I could use it on my cordless drill. And it went in and I got to some of the areas that I couldn't get. And I also got this, which these are all different shapes of wheels. Here there's some cone-shaped ones, skinny cone, fatter cone. Anyway, a whole assortment of these. And they also let me get into areas that were tough to get to. Again, you can do all this by hand, but I prefer to do as much using a machine as possible because it works faster and easier. All right, so that's what I've got. I've got to run and go do work on the rest of this car, which is out at the car condo. But I wanted to show you what I've done. Let's see. I wanted to show you, all right, so here's an area that is a mixture of, here's the 600 grit, here's where I resprayed it, and then here's some areas that are almost flat, but there's a little bit of speckled gloss right here. All right, that speckled gloss, I could keep sanding with 600 grit and get rid of those speckles. I'm not sure if you can see them in this light, but anyway, trust me, there's little glossy speckles in here. I could keep sanding. The problem with that is I could end up accidentally sanding through the color down to the primer that's underneath it. Then I'd have to respray it like I did here and have to do that whole thing again. If you use the polish or something that's a little more flexible like a sanding sponge, it will actually be flexible enough to get down into those shiny spots and get rid of those shiny spots. Now they'll still be there, those low spots will still be there. It's just that they won't be obvious because they won't be shiny. They'll have the same lack of gloss as the rest. And then when you put the clear coat on top of it, that's the part that you really need to be smooth. Once you get clear coat on there, you won't see those little speckles and stuff. One of the other things that I just noticed is here's a detail sander micro tool. This works good for getting into like those headlight areas. I ended up not using it in this case, but I've used it in the past. It's like that other yellow one, kind of spongy, semi-firm, not as soft as a real sponge, but not hard. And it's flexible, so you can get in there and get to all those areas. They make kits in different grits. It used to be, when I bought it, it was all different grits in one package. Now, when I went to go get it, it wasn't that way. You had to pick which grit you wanted. This is the finest grit they had. I think they had like maybe 180 and 80. I don't know the numbers, maybe 120. Anyway, they had 3 different grits, but you had to pick which grit. This is $10 for it. I really would rather they allowed me to have all of it. It was 15 sheets, so it was 5 sheets of each grit. But anyway, they make more money by selling it this way and forcing you to buy more. All right, that's it. All right, so like, subscribe, hit the alert, hit the thanks if you want to donate. And if you don't like what I'm doing, you don't know Jack. Bye.